Hi, I'm Brittney Saunders and welcome to Big Business, the place where business is far from boring. And today I'm recording on Gadigal land. Now, I somehow managed to build an empire from the garage underneath my house, and I'm here to share it all with you, from the wins, the losses, the huge mistakes, and the funny moments in between. So whether you're in business already, you're not in the game at all, or maybe you're looking for some inspo, or you simply just want to hear the tea, this is the podcast for you. Coming up in today's episode, we are getting personal. I'm getting a sense that you all enjoy a bit of a personal episode, so we're taking a deep dive into my resume and my job history. Now, believe it or not, before doing what I do now, you know, everything that you see online that I do and running all these businesses, I had over 20 jobs. My first official job was when I was 14 and I worked up until the age of 21, and it was at 21 that I became self-employed and I haven't looked back. I'm now 31, so I'm celebrating 10 years of being self-employed and working for myself. But in those years, I worked over 20 jobs, and funnily enough, I think working through 20 plus jobs in those early teen and early 20s years, I think it really led me to where I am today. And it all kind of makes sense in my entrepreneurial journey. So without further ado, let's just dive into it and take a look at my extensive job history. So my youngest memory of wanting to earn money honestly goes back to primary school. I remember being the kid that wanted to do anything for a few dollars. And I think a lot of us were that way. And I almost think in a way, was that when my entrepreneurial fire started? I was that kid that would say, can I please do this around the house for $5? Like I always wanted to earn pocket money in exchange of chores, when really I should have just been doing the chores anyway. Me, can I make my bed for $2, please? I always wanted to do chores around the house and earn some money, you know, in exchange. Like I wanted to work and earn money. And I remember offering to do things for family, friends, and friends as well, like clean their room for $5. Just little things like that is my first real memory of wanting to earn money. I think the first proper job that I had, which wasn't really a proper job, and I'm sure it's a job that a lot of us did, was my stepbrother and I, we would have been maybe 11 or 12. We somehow signed up in our neighbourhood to deliver junk mail, but we would get all the junk mail to our house, and I remember everything was separated. Like you'd get one piece of junk mail and another piece, and then you had to combine everything together and then get rubber bands and tie it up in a roll and put the rubber band around it. And we'd do that for like 300 lots. And then we'd put them into bags and we would get our stepmom to drive us around the suburb and we'd get out and deliver it all around. And I remember that was so exciting. And, you know, I was 11 or 12 at the time. And I don't know, we probably earned $20 from doing the whole suburb. And that was the first thing that I really earned money from. But then if you want to talk about my first ever official job, it was good old Macca's. I think back then you had to be 14 and 9 months to wait to apply at Macca's. And I remember I was young for my year in school, so I was a whole year younger, and everyone in my year had already gone out and gotten their jobs, and I was so annoyed that I had to wait until the next year. But I just couldn't wait to earn money. That's what it was for me. I was so desperate to turn 14 and 9 months and go and get that first job. I remember making up my resume online, and you would apply online back in the day, which I'm surprised by, to be honest. But I remember applying on the McDonald's website when I was 14. You could apply when you were 14, then you would get the job when you were 14 and 9 months. And I got the job like the day I turned 14 and 9 months, and I was straight down to our local Macca's, which was luckily around the corner from my house. And I remember my first paycheck being $90 or something like that. And I thought I'd absolutely hit the jackpot, earning $90, because I guess when we were kids, we were never given a lot of money. Like we would get $50 for our birthday off, you know, Nan and Pop, and $20 for Christmas or whatever. And we were never really given a lot of money from either of our parents. So to get $90 pay was just so exciting at 14 and 9 months. And I instantly became addicted to working. I was that kid that was obviously going to school, don't know what year I was in, 8 or 9, and then I would work, you know, 5 or 6 nights a week at Macca's until, you know, 11 or 12 at night. I'd be there closing up the restaurant, and finishing super late. And I absolutely loved it. I became obsessed with working and earning money. I picked up a second job. You know how like a lot of kids had a second job? So my second job that I ever got at Baskin-Robbins. So then I was working selling ice creams at Baskin-Robbins and also at Macca's at the same time. And then for some bizarre reason, that wasn't enough for me. So I went out and I got a third job. So at one point there, when I'm around 15 years old, I was juggling 3 jobs: Macca's, Baskin-Robbins, and Subway. I have no idea how I managed to juggle 3 as well as going to school 5 days a week, but I absolutely hated school. I think I was wanting to get these jobs to, I don't know, try and get away from school somehow, even though I was still going there 5 days a week. And I didn't have a license at the time. I was 15, so I was relying on my mum and my stepdad at the time. Wonder how he's doing. I was relying on them dropping me to all these shifts at all these different jobs. And I remember it being a lot. Like I was never not working, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. And I don't know if teenagers these days are different. Like I can imagine they are, but I really loved that back then. That was the thing that teenagers did. Like as soon as you turned that 14 and 9 months, you went and you got that job at McDonald's or Hungry Jack's or Burger King back then, wherever it was. Because I think it just set such a really good foundation for me when it came to working and learning how to do things. I feel like teenagers, this is me stereotyping, but I feel like teenagers might be more different these days. Like, oh, I'm not going to go work at Macca's. Like, that's not cool kind of thing. Whereas back then, we didn't care about that. Like, it was cool that we had a job at Macca's, and it was cool that we had a job in general. And it just instantly taught me so much from the age of 14 and 9 months. Like, here's all the things you have to do. Here's all the safety things you have to do. You have to show up on time. You have to have your uniform looking nice. Just all those little things. I feel it just teaches you like so much from such a young age. And I'm really glad that I kind of grew up in that generation and I did that when it didn't matter if you worked at Macca's, like it wasn't uncool. So I'll always look back at that and think it was amazing. And I don't talk to any teenagers these days, but my advice to any teenagers out there, or if you have kids that are teenagers, is go and get yourselves in one of those fast food jobs because they do everything so thoroughly and their training. And I even think back to, when I did work at Macca's, like you would go in and the first job that you would get put on is dining room. So you weren't even allowed to work behind the counter. You would get put on dining room. And that was cleaning the dining room and the toilets. And then once you got good at that, then you got put on fries. So then you'd be on fries for a shift and you kind of worked your way up, and it just teaches you those foundations of a workplace from such a young age. And I'm so glad that I did that, even though that was such a bloody long time ago. But moving on, I had juggled 3 jobs and then I was back to 1. Working at Baskin-Robbins, and I loved that. But I wanted to step into something different, so I got my first ever job as a waitress at the age of 15, which is crazy because I remember I was not old, like I was nowhere near old enough to serve alcohol, and this was at an Italian restaurant that's shut down now, but it was like a local Italian restaurant, and I was nowhere near old enough to serve the alcohol, but I could do everything else there. And I remember being so scared, going to get a waitressing job, never had one before. Carrying 3 plates frightened the shit out of me. And I guess this is like a part in my, developmental years of discovering fears and just going with it anyway kind of thing. I remember just being so petrified about learning to carry 3 plates. It was this whole big thing, but I just went, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Turns out once you learn how to carry 3 plates, you'll always remember. Can still do it now. If anyone ever needs me to carry 3 dishes at dinner, you can count on me. So then I eventually gave up Baskin-Robbins and then I stayed working at that Italian restaurant for years. I worked there for long enough until I turned 18 that I could serve alcohol. So it was like a good 2 or 3 years that I stayed there. Now, it was during this time, I was also at school, that I had this urge that I wanted to drop out of school. So I went down the whole avenue of thinking I wanted to be a beauty therapist and also thinking I wanted to be a hairdresser, because they were the 2 things that, I guess us girls had as an option back then to kind of get a traineeship and drop out of school. I never went down the beautician route, but I did take a stab at hairdressing because I thought, perfect, I can get a hairdressing apprenticeship, I can drop out of school. I think I'm in year 9 at this point. So I went and did a couple of trials at some local hair salons here in Newcastle. I think I did 2 trials at 2 different hair salons. And back then you would do full days. And I almost think I did like a 3-day trial at one of them to get this apprenticeship. And all I did for those 3 days was sweep and make coffees. Like I did absolutely nothing else. I didn't even get to wash hair. And at the end, I remember not getting the apprenticeship that I so badly wanted. And I got handed like a pack of shampoo and conditioner as my pay. Like, thank you, but you didn't get the job. And I remember being so bummed about that. But I don't think it was because I was passionate at all about wanting to become a hairdresser. It was because I just was so desperate to drop out of school and just work and earn my own money and be independent. But that fell through. And you know what? Things in life always fall through. And I always think, imagine if I had gotten one of those apprenticeships that I went for, how different would my life be now? And I always say this, like these tiny little things happen in our life, but it pushes us in a complete different direction. And I always think back to that and think, wow, my life would be so different if I had gotten that apprenticeship. So I dropped out of school and all I had was the waitressing job at the Italian restaurant, but I was working there basically 5 or 6 nights a week. And you know, when you're in hospitality, sometimes you're working like 11 shifts in a row kind of thing, like 11 days in a row. I was working a lot and earning a decent amount of money and I was still living at home. So I just dropped out of school anyway and thought I'll just figure this out. I just really wanted to get out there and work. I didn't want to be at school anymore. I was not interested in any of the subjects that I was doing. I just wanted to get out there and earn my own money. So I, without even a second thought, dropped out of school. And I remember everyone that I was friends with at school were kind of like, you're crazy, like you need to stay, you need to go to uni. But I had no interest in doing anything there either. And something was just pushing me to just get out there and earn my own money. So I walked out of school and honestly never looked back. And I remember feeling really good about that. And my dad wasn't in the picture like in my life at this point. If you listen to my other personal episode, you'll know about that. And so I only really had the guidance of my mum, who was also very much like, I don't give a shit if you drop out of school kind of thing. So I just went, fuck it, and dropped out on a whim. Like there was not much thought that went into that whatsoever. And on that topic of not having guidance, so obviously my dad is not in the picture at all in my life. He's walked out of my life by this point. And then having my mum, who was just very much like, I don't give a shit if you go to school or not. Like I never had any type of guidance. I never had an adult figure in my life as a young influential teen being like, hey, like maybe you should pick some subjects that you're interested in, or you should really pursue your passions, or you should really look at getting into uni. I kind of felt like I was just in free play mode when I was this young teenager. I felt like I could just do anything. I almost felt like an adult. I didn't have anyone pushing me in any sort of direction. And if anything, I think that's what led me to go down this path of kind of living life and going into the workforce in free play mode. It's like you've pressed play on The Sims and off you go. Like The Sims just on automatic mode. I think having no guidance could definitely have been a negative thing, and it could have led me down a path of destruction and just ending up nowhere. But somehow, and I don't know how, but somehow over those next few years, I figured it all out on my own and kind of figured out I can do whatever the fuck I want. And the thing was, I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do, but it would be all the next jobs that would kind of lead me to the discovery of, I actually don't want to work for anyone else. I want to work for myself. So I landed myself my first ever sales role. And the way that it was worded online on the job ad was like executive sales associate. And I'm like, oh, this sounds fucking legit. Turns out the sales associate executive job was selling pay TV. This was back before any of the streaming services were a thing. It was when you either had Foxtel, Ozstar, or you had just normal free-to-air TV. And I got this job in sales, and I would stand in the middle of shopping centres trying to get people to sign up to Ozstar, which was the regional version of Foxtel. because I would go out to like, so I'm from Newcastle, but then there's like Maitland and the Hunter. So this head office was based in Maitland and the Hunter. So I was servicing the area that was Ozstar. It was like not Foxtel, but same sort of thing. I actually have no idea how I had the confidence to do that job. I often reflect back on that job and think, I don't think I could do that now, stand in the middle of a shopping centre selling someone else's product. And the scary thing about it was as well is it wasn't just a one-off payment. I was stopping people in the shopping centre to say, hey, do you want to sign up to 24 months of pay TV? Like, that was ballsy. And I think, again, that was something that scared the shit out of me, but I just threw myself into it and thought, fuck it, I can do it. By having, this be my fourth job already by the age of 16, I was already building this like false sense of confidence that I could almost do anything if I just gave it a crack. So I stepped into that role and I lasted there all of probably 2 months. And the reason for that is because I was working for commission only, which was, it was wild, and I don't think they're allowed to do that anymore. And it was kind of an MLM kind of situation. Like, I then could have got people under my team kind of thing, and then I earned money off their commissions. It was all a little bit like, it was giving a bit corrupt vibes. It was giving pyramid scheme, and I think it ended up coming out that it was obviously a pyramid scheme. And there would be days where, like, I would catch the train up to Maitland, which was like 30 or 40 minutes. Then I'd go out and stand in the shopping centre all day long, and I'd stand on my feet all day long, no chair, stopping people, like, and we would learn all these sales tactics and stuff. Like, you'd pretend someone dropped something on the ground, like, oh, you dropped something, and then you'd like get their attention. So I learned a lot of good little sales tactics back then. But I'd go and do that job all fucking day and then get the train home, then go waitress at night at the Italian restaurant, and I earned $0 selling the pay TV and earned more at my waitressing job at night. So I very quickly got myself out of that job, but it was a good experience, and I can look back at it now and laugh. So I then ventured into the world of retail. I landed myself my first retail job, and again, I had no experience in retail, but I guess having, Macca's, Subway, Baskin-Robbins on my resume, it then kind of equipped me in customer service to then apply for jobs in retail. And I'll tell you another thing that I used to do back then. I used to lie so badly on my resume in terms of how long I'd worked at places. I would completely fudge the dates because in my mind, I just thought, as if anyone's going to call my references anyway, and as if they're going to ask, how long exactly did she work there? So I'd, move the months around a little bit and make it look like I'd worked at places longer, especially if I only worked somewhere for 2 months. I'm going to put at least 6. They're not going to find out. I'd gotten my P's and I landed myself a job at Connor, the men's suit and clothing store. Still around today. They've been going for a while. I take my hat off to them. Landed a job there. Don't know how. I don't know why I wanted to go work there, but I just wanted to do anything in the daytime because I was just waitressing in the night. I think I worked at Connor, again, maybe 2 months max. And I was developing, I will say, a bad habit, but in a way I want to say it's good, of quitting a job when it didn't satisfy me anymore. So I quit that sales job. I got this job at Connor. Like, the people that were working there were nice and it was a good environment. The thing that I hated the most was the KPIs. If I just sold a customer a pair of pants, because that's all they came in for, I would get questioned by the manager why I didn't also sell the shirt to match. And I completely understand that manager was just doing their job. But very quickly, I learnt to hate the KPI side of working in that retail store, and I quit. And this was a habit that I got myself into more and more as the next years would go by, is getting jobs, and as soon as there was something that I didn't like, or if I just didn't like going there, I would quit and go on to the next. The next job after that, I stayed in retail. I got a job in a women's shoe store, which was called Wanted Shoes, which I believe shut down. And I ended up working there for quite a while as well, but I think I just eventually got over that. Meanwhile, during this kind of period where I was working at the shoe store, this is where I stepped into the YouTube world. This is when I, was making all these videos at home as well. And I guess I started to build a little following back then, upload videos and get 500 views here, 300 views there. So this is where the whole YouTube internet thing came into play as well, as juggling all these jobs. And it was throughout this time as well, when I was working at the shoe store, that I then started dabbling in my other little business ventures, which I think I've spoken about in previous episodes, my spray tans and makeup. I just tried to put my fingers into absolutely everything. But I eventually got over the shoe store and quit there as well. Can't exactly remember why. I probably just got over it. I then went into my last retail job, which was working in the fragrance department at Myer. Worked there for a while as well. And again, it did feel really salesy and they were KPI driven, but probably not as much as the men's clothing store. And it was nice enough. I made friends with all the older women that were working on the beauty counters, which was really nice. And I felt like I was the baby, being the 17-year-old there. And it was good because it was in my nan's local shopping centre as well that she goes to all the time. So Nan would come and visit me all the time. So that was really nice. And I enjoyed selling perfume because I loved perfume back then. Still love it now. But I eventually got over that as well. Now, when I just turned 18, I got the most random job I've probably ever had in my entire life. And if you listen to my other podcast, High Scrollers, I've spoken about this over there. But I got a job working at the Great Aussie Bush Camp. Now, if you don't know what Aussie Bush Camp is, it's a school camp for kids. You go there in year 3, 4, 5, 6 and even high school, and you do all sorts of activities like rock climbing, abseiling, canoeing, fencing, giant swing, all that kind of stuff. I got a job there as a sports instructor when I was 18 years old. And let me tell you, the onboarding process, or the trial process to even get that job, went over a few weeks. And you had to do physical trials. You had to do all of your first aid. You had to do you had to learn how to tie every single knot that there is with rope. And you had to kind of do all these physical tests to get the job. I have no idea why I thought, I'm interested in doing this. But I went through the whole process and I ended up getting a job there. And this was sort of full time. It was either 3 days a week or 5 days a week, depending on how long the camp was that you were looking after. And that in itself was one of the most random things that I've ever experienced as an 18-year-old. And again, a great experience. I got to do so many different things, and I just eventually worked out that it really wasn't for me, because you would have to wake up at 5 a.m. to go and wake the kids up, and then you would be getting home at 5 or 6 p.m. as well. But that is another really random job that I've had. And it was kind of iconic as well, because I went to Aussie Bush Camp when I was in school. So it was really cool to go back as an 18-year-old as one of the instructors there. So that was job number 11-ish. It's by this point that I had just moved out of home. I moved out of home when I was 17, just going on 18. And the last kind of job that I found myself working in casually was at the hotel, at Noah's, in the restaurant. And again, I was working there enough that I could live out of home. And mind you, this is back in the day when rent was maybe $100 a week when you were living in a share house, because rent was a lot cheaper than it is now. Inflation. I've never had a full-time job by this point, but I'm only 18, but I have had over 10 jobs. And I still had no idea what the fuck I wanted to do. It was by this point that I had gone through every industry from sales to retail, hospitality, sports camp instructing, makeup and spray tans and everything in between, and I still wasn't happy with any of it. I hated it. I hated it all. And so I thought to myself, well, maybe the dream is to get a 9-to-5 office role, because I think that is a dream that can be painted to us when we're younger, is, you go and get that 9-to-5 office job and then you're set for life kind of thing, So I thought, all right, that's what I'm going to do. And by this point, I obviously had a lot of confidence, because the other thing too was almost every job that I went for, I got, and that gave me a lot of confidence as well. Going into all these random interviews is I've got this job. So I thought, well, I'm just going to apply for some random admin jobs in Newcastle. So I applied for a few and I landed my first ever full-time role working in a pest control office, answering the phones and booking in people when they would call up and they got cockroaches. It was really glamorous. And do you want to know a funny story? Actually, I'm sure she won't mind saying it. But my office manager at that time, She now has her own cleaning business in Newcastle, and she cleans our office and warehouse. So it's like done this full circle. My old office manager is now coming to clean for us in her business. I see her every second Thursday at work, and she said when you walked into your interview, it was my birthday when I went to have the interview at this pest control place, and I don't know if it must have been my 18th birthday. And she said, you walked in and I was dressed in nice clothes, like not business clothes. I was dressed in going out for lunch clothes because it was my birthday. And she said, you just walked in and you said, hi, sorry, I'm a bit overdressed, but it's my birthday today. And she said, your confidence, I just thought I've got to hire you on the spot because this girl just walked in, she's full of confidence, and the main part of that job was answering phones. So their thing that they were looking for was confidence. She said, you just walked in, la-di-da, it's my birthday, that's why I look so nice. And we crack up about that almost every time I see her now, every second Thursday. So that's a bit of a funny story for you there. But I got my first ever admin job, had no idea what I was really doing. But again, at this point, I'd built up that false confidence that I could learn anything. Throw me any task and I will be able to do it. I told them in the interview about my YouTube channel as well. Like that was the amount of confidence that I had. She said, when you walked out the door, we jumped straight onto your YouTube channel and was watching all those. And this is like, mind you, this is when YouTube was the OG YouTube. Like it was shit. She said they went and watched my videos straight away. And so they knew the whole time that I was working there, that I was also making these little videos, and I was maybe making like $20 here and there out of like the ads that were running on them. So I decided randomly at 19 years old that, you know what, I had enough of Newcastle. I want to get out there and experience the world. By this point, I feel like I've lived 30 lives anyway because I've had basically 20 jobs already. I was going to move to Brisbane to live with this friend of mine who also made YouTube videos. It was kind of this little fun thing that we did together. So I packed my car to the roof and I drove to Brisbane, and I was going to move straight in with my friend. Me being me, I just went up there and said I'll figure it out when I get there. When I got there, I went straight to a restaurant, did an interview, got a job on the spot and started working in a restaurant because that was like a good thing to fall back on, was just that hospitality background that I had. So at the same time that I was working at this restaurant in Brisbane, I started applying for more full-time roles. Oh my goodness. And something happened. Something really... I don't know if it's really funny. I've told this story before. I don't know if I've told it on High Scrollers. I won't tell you the whole story here. But during this process of working at the restaurant and trying to apply for full-time jobs, I also applied for a job at a strip club, but working on the door. I don't know if it's like a common practice, but I went for this job at this strip club up in Brisbane, like a really big establishment. It was pretty cool. But I went in there because I was like, I can work on the door. I'm confident enough to do that. Like there's no way I'll be confident enough to be an actual dancer. And when I went there and had this interview, they essentially didn't have the door job. And it was just to try to kind of convince me to sign up as a dancer. I think I've done a whole High Scrollers episode on this. Maybe I can do a little bonus or something one time. But it was the weirdest experience because the interviewer was kind of saying, you look like you could be a dancer. And I was like, oh, no. Like, I can't even take my top off in front of my boyfriend at the time kind of thing. So no, not for me. But anyway, that's a whole other story in itself. Anyway, I ended up landing myself a job as a personal assistant at 19 years old at a company called G. James Glass and Aluminium, which I don't know about now, but at the time they were Australia's biggest glass and aluminium company. And I remember them saying to me, we're even bigger than O'Brien, to the point where we don't have to advertise, because I had never heard of them, right? And so, you know, when you're applying for jobs online and you're just applying left, right and centre for any kind of job, like it doesn't, that was me anyway. I was just like bulk applying. And I remember when they called me for the interview, they're like, hi, this is G. James Glass. And I went in for my interview and it's this Australia-wide massive company, like this big corporate kind of environment. And here's little old 19-year-old me in my Kmart button-up pinstripe shirt. And I ended up getting the job there. And it was actually one of the coolest jobs that I've had. And the reason for that was because the boss that I was a PA to, he was just the coolest guy ever. His name was Tony, and he was just such a legend. And I was applying for a role to replace someone who was going on maternity leave. I had them like laughing the whole interview, even though it was this kind of like corporate role. And I remember walking out and thinking like, that was really fun and they were really nice, but I don't know if I'll get it because this is like a corporate kind of vibe. And I remember they called me back. They said they would call me back in 2 weeks because they had so many applications and so many interviews, and they ended up calling me back really quickly, and they invited me back in and offered me the job. And I'll never forget this. At 19 years old, Tony saying to me that they did my interview and they did some more interviews, and that they ended up picking me because I was the only one that made them laugh. And they said, we had people applying that have degrees and all this sort of stuff, but you were the only one that made us laugh. And I was like, well, it was really cool. And so I landed that Monday to Friday role there, and I was essentially just a PA to Tony and the office. I really began to feel that feeling of waking up every day and thinking like, this isn't for me. Like, this isn't how I want to live my life. And I'm sure that's a feeling that a lot of us experience, is that alarm going off. Oh, I would even set my alarm, the night before, and have that dreaded feeling of knowing that it's going to wake me up in the morning and that I'm going to have to get ready and get myself to work. And I remember I would call my mum on the way to work. And even though I loved my boss at the time, I hated this routine that I felt myself getting into. And I remember I would say to myself, but this is what we're supposed to do. Like, we're supposed to just work Monday to Friday, get up, get ready, eat your breakfast, go to work, come home, cook dinner, go to sleep. But I found myself like absolutely resenting that kind of life. And I know that that's, the way that we live life. Like, we work every day to get the money that we need, and we go home and it's just rinse and repeat. But it was around this time that I really felt myself hating that. Like, I'd wake up every day and literally want to cry because I hated it that much. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that feeling. One of the big differences with me is I don't know what it was, but I wasn't going to stop until I figured out how I couldn't feel that way ever again. Like, I just knew that I could get out there and do something more. So I worked at G. James for a while, probably not that long, and then I had a falling out with the friend that I moved to Queensland for, of course. So I moved back to Newcastle and made my way home. It was actually really sad when I quit there. I wrote my boss a really nice card, and he said things that like I'll never forget. He had really young daughters at the time who were probably older now. He said when I left, like, I hope my daughters grow up to like be like you. And it was just, he was the nicest boss ever. I always like think about him every now and then, and he left such an impact on me. So I moved back from Brisbane at the age of 20, and I broke up with my boyfriend that I had at the time, which is also really sad. And when I got back and settled into Newcastle, I wound up in my last full-time job. So the last full-time job that I had was when I was 21. It was another 9-to-5 office admin kind of role. And if you go back and listen to my very first episode of Big Business, where I am now at this point in this episode then leads into episode 1 of Big Business. When I was 21, I threw in that full-time job just like I'd thrown in 20 plus jobs before that. And that's when I began working for myself. I honestly love having such a broad job history, and at the end of the day, I'm actually grateful that I had no guidance growing up. Like I've said now in this episode and in other ones before, having no guidance from my parents growing up could have been a really bad thing, and I can imagine it would be a bad thing for a lot of people if they do grow up with no one kind of saying, you need to get a job and you need to stay in it for years so it looks good on your resume and so that you have job security. And I remember I even had like 5 different super accounts because how some employers would make you sign up with these ones and those ones. Like, I had no one in my life teaching me about, I guess, the more important foundations when it comes to job security. But at the same time, I'm equally as grateful because having no guidance kind of gave me that sense of freedom and that sense of I don't have to conform to any sort of societal standard, because I very well could have stayed in that last full-time job that I had, or the one at the pest control or whatever, and thought to myself, yep, this is it, this is the dream for me, 9 to 5, job security, all that kind of stuff, which I know is fantastic. But instead, it kind of led me down this path of, not stopping until I found something that I actually wanted to do. And I think having no guidance from my parents through all those jobs and years, it taught me to be a bit of a risk taker. Like, who cares if I've never done a job like this? Let's just give it a go. Like, that's where I learnt that trait that I have now. And you'll see me now in my career. I'm trying things and giving them a go. I've been doing it since back then, and that's when I learnt it. I learnt to have that confidence and to believe in myself and not have any fears, because if you just go at it full steam ahead, that you might be surprised by what comes of it. You might learn something and you just never know what's going to happen. So yeah, that's a little bit of a backstory in my job history, and I love being able to talk about all the places that I've worked, and working in so many places as well has obviously given me so much experience in all different fields, and I think about it a lot now with the workplaces that I've created, and it's also made me passionate about being the kind of boss that I am today. I've had so many bosses in my life of all different types, and it's made me really mindful that I want to create a workplace that people can enjoy showing up to every single day. I'm really passionate about that. I want to create roles that people can thrive in. I want to be a boss that people can come to. I want to be a boss that will lead instead of boss around. So I often am thinking back on those years today in the business that I'm in now and with the staff I have working for me now. So I really do feel like every step that I took back then led me exactly to where I was today. And if you want to hear the rest of this story and how I then took off from 21 years old up until where I am now at 31, you can go back and listen to episode 1 of Big Business if you haven't already, because that's where that episode begins. It's kind of a big loop that we've just done. But I hope that you've learned a little something more about me in this episode, and maybe you've learnt why I am the way that I am in terms of just giving things a go and seeing how it goes and not kind of thinking twice and just jumping in the deep end. I would say that all stems from having no guidance back then and just giving things a go. So that's me and my history and my resume. And I would hate to actually write that all out on paper on an actual resume, because it would be absolutely shocking. But we live, we learn, and we can look back on it and laugh about it in our podcast. So we absolutely love that. As always, I'm going to be ending today's episode with a tip of the week. And I feel like I always just lean into the theme of each episode. So my tip of the week this week is take that risk. Do that thing that scares you, even if it's something as small as learning something new, like how to carry 3 plates. So that was something I was so scared of, and I just did it anyway. Everything that I've done, I've just given it a go. We all don't know what we're doing until we just try it and give it a go. So my advice is take that risk. That's all I've done my whole life, and it's led me to a really good point, I would say. And I'm going to keep making those risks and see where they take me in the next 10 years. Who knows, I might work another 10 jobs in between now and then. Who knows, or I might just stay doing what I'm doing now forever. We'll soon see, but that is my tip of the week. Take the risk. And you should also take a risk by hitting 5 stars on this podcast, because you never know what might come from that. Anyway, my friends, that is another episode of Big Business complete.
The chase your dreams.
Oh yeah, duh. I've forgotten my outro. Sorry, everyone. And remember, chase after those dreams as if they owe you money.